Hey y'all, I'm in the psychedelic room with the light bulb that changes colors and adds to the trippy atmosphere of this video. And I'm going to be starting with starting on these Q&As. Now, this is something that I haven't done in a while, ever since I got 1,000 viewers or 1,000 friends or followers or whatever they call them on YouTube. I've been able to do live casts, and since I was doing this sort of in lieu of being able to do a live cast early on with this new channel, which of course I had an old channel that had over 4,000 friends or viewers or followers or whatever, but it got nuked by YouTube. So I've had to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and even now, it's nowhere near. It's only a shadow of the audience that I once had. But I guess the view counts are sort of similar to what I used to have. But I realized that with these Q&As, they're, it kind of gave an opportunity to respond to or to give some of y'all more of a chance to ask me stuff, whereas on live streams, it's just whoever happens to be there, and whatever they happen to be, and then it's usually a pretty small group of people. It's fine. Everybody who shows up for my live casts, I'm thankful for all of you, but I thought this would be a way to cast the net a little wider. So I'm going to begin with the oldest and move to the newest. So, first question, what is your opinion on Trumpinstein theory? This is something I had to have explained to me, but let's see if I can bring up the explanation here. Okay, so the idea of the Trumpinstein theory is the theory that Trump is an amalgamation by the elite to serve a mixed but necessary purpose. It's an idea Don Jeffries came up with. I don't know who Don Jeffries is, or maybe I did but forgot. I don't know. A lot of people keep track of these days. Anyway, I think it seems probable, not just possible, probable that this describes Trump's true identity, because I've always found it strange that this man who was in the public eye since the 80s, since like the early 80s, he was this real estate mogul who was on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and became just this face of the I don't know, the rich guy, the mogul. He was very New York. He was like this sort of personality for much of my life, from the 80s, and then so like from the 80s up through 2014, he was basically this apolitical, just sort of celebrity. Went on Oprah, did cameos on sitcoms, was in one of the Home Alone movies, had his reality TV show The Apprentice, and all that time he was not a divisive figure at all. He was just a sort of larger than life, New York rich guy mogul, who said what was on his mind, and was gruff and tough, and that sort of thing. I mean, some people thought he was obnoxious, but nobody really hated him per se, for being a hateful, racist, bigot, far right winger. That all changed in 2015, and I found that really peculiar. That there was he had this makeover, and suddenly he was this divisive political figure who was loved by half the country and hated by half the country. So, yeah, the idea that there's more going on than meets the eye with this guy seems quite likely. And the idea of Trump as the outsider, I never understood like that they were trying to pitch Trump as outsider. He's always been part of a, he was part of a wealthy and influential family. He grew up wealthy. So, and he always had a lot of media influence. So, yeah, I mean, you never know. We don't know anything about these guys. That's why we shouldn't ever really trust them. Trust people in your family. Trust your friends that you know. Don't trust these people who are just on TV or on the internet and posture in one way or another. So I think it's possible that's true. It's quite possible that Trumpinstein theory is true. Okay. Next question. You mentioned having some Norwegian and I'll identify these people. That was JTR 1976. This is Ravnaguten. And Ravnaguten says, you mentioned having some Norwegian ancestry once. Where did your folks come from? My Norwegian ancestry is all on my mother's side. My mother's maiden name was Anderson, and it was never quite clear to me whether it was Anderson S-O-N or Anderson S-E-N, because I've actually seen it written both ways. I always preferred S-E-N because that was more exotic and cooler somehow than S-O-N. But in any case, I am a quarter Norwegian on my maternal side. My mother was born. Well, I don't know where. I'm not sure where she was born, but she lived her childhood in a small town about an hour outside of Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin, a town called Whitewater. And my dad grew up in Milwaukee. And my dad is of Polish and Italian ancestry. My mom was of Norwegian, English, German ancestry. So yeah, there's the answer to that question. I would add that I think that my experience in traveling to Wisconsin as we did as a family, my parents and I and our dog, and that was it because I didn't have any siblings. I was an only child. But during all of my childhood, we went to Wisconsin every Christmas and every summer. So twice a year, I would go and see both my dad's side and my mom's side of the family, and they were marked contrasts, as you can imagine. One side being Polish, Italian, working class, urban, and the others being, more staid, middle class, again, Norwegian / English / German. But if you go, or if you live, I mean, I say if you go there like it's necessarily a place that you would travel to. It was for me, but if you live in small towns in in Wisconsin or Michigan or Minnesota. This has probably changed somewhat recently because all things have gotten shittier everywhere. But I remember growing up just always being taken with how clean everything was, and how, you know, like this was a small, these were small towns that were prosperous. You know, here in the South, you had a lot of small towns that were kind of run down, or that had you know, a good side and a poor side, and of course race relations played into that. But up north in the Midwest, the section of the country that I'm talking about, which I guess would include northern Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. You find it was just this other world. It was like, it was so well kept. It was, and it's not just about race. It's also about or ethnicity. It's also about culture. I think that these, like, not just Norwegian, but I think there's a big there's a big Swedish contingent. I don't know how many Danes or Finns settled in that region, but there's a big Norwegian and a big Swedish element, and it seemed to me that these are the kind of people who had a certain, like, it was like civic pride was a really important thing for them, and you know, they had a kind of you know, you know, definitely a work ethic, but also this kind of like, you know, there's a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. So they could be a little bit on the rigid side. You know, they weren't the loosey-gooseyest types of people that necessarily you would find. The Polish and Italians, that side, they'd be more liable to let it all hang out. But anyway, that's you didn't ask about any of that, but that's just interesting things that I observed growing up, and as a Euro mutt, you know, somebody whose ancestry is from all over Europe, Southern Europe, Northern Europe, Eastern. Well, Poland is sort of Eastern. I guess it's more central, but Eastern and Western Europe. You know, it's interesting to see those kinds of differences on display. Okay, user WP5NO6CN2B asks, "What should I do?" Well, and of course the absence of context there is hilarious. I would say, regardless of your situation, you should, well, pray. That's one thing I would recommend. I don't know if that's something you do regularly, or something you don't do very much, or if you consider yourself spiritual or religious, or if you don't. But in any case, I would pray to God, and if you need help, you know, ask Him for help, and see what happens. Just see what happens. Maybe nothing will happen. Nothing that you're aware of. Nothing that you'll be conscious of. But maybe something will happen. But I would also say you should seek out counsel from people whom you trust, and these can be mentors, you know, like fathers or uncles or some, you know, or people like that, or, you know, former teachers or whatever, or they can be peers, or they can be both. I would say, make a list of the people that you trust, that you don't mind sharing things with, and talk to them about whatever it is that you need to talk to them about. That's what I would recommend that you do. So I hope you will take my suggestion. I think you'll be pleased with the results. All right. Profit potential 5740. See, what I like about this is I hear from a lot of people that I don't hear from most of the time otherwise. Profit potential asks, what are your favorite movies? I've said this in a previous Q&A, but it was maybe 2 years ago now. That was the last time I was doing those. I have I'm a cinephile. I've copped to that. I have pled guilty to that accusation. I am an intractable cinephile, and there were two main bouts of cinephilia that I had. The first one was very, very young, when I was I was not very, very young, but like 10 or 11 or 12. I went to a ton of movies around that time, and so I would the favorite movies of my youth would be the original Star Wars trilogy, which I've talked about in videos before. The Indiana Jones movies, the first two Indiana Jones movies, and those would be the major ones from my early cinephilia. And in those days, it was all about just, action adventure, cool scenes with battle scenes and fight scenes and quests and good versus evil and all that. I really dug all that. And then later, as a late teen and into my 20s, maybe starting from my senior year of high school into my college years, I started getting heavy into more artsy type of cinema. Directors like Scorsese, Coppola. Like good Coppola, like Apocalypse Now, not crap Coppola. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of, really since the 70s. Not so much Kubrick back then, but anyway, that was sort of what informed my cinema going by that time. The Coen brothers, even David Lynch, although I had problems with him, I still enjoyed him for being different. So what would be my favorite movies? I always list off Taxi Driver. I've said the Star Wars trilogy, even though I know that they wouldn't withstand scrutiny, but they would still be my favorite. In all ways, especially not Return of the Jedi, and I would say Episode 4, or whatever you call it, A New Hope, or Star Wars, also has its moments, cheesy moments, but I my love is undying for that whole original trilogy, and for, I would say, the first two Indiana Jones movies, because they both came in that sweet spot when I was a young cinema goer. And then movies like Taxi Driver and I was so big on Scorsese for a long time. Taxi Driver, Fight Club. Fight Club was later, of course. But I'll just list off some more, like Taxi Driver, Fight Club. Let's see. In recent years, definitely Joker is up there amongst my faves. I would say Apocalypse Now would be among them as well, and Jim Jarmusch's Stranger Than Paradise, Whit Stillman's trilogy, Metropolitan, Barcelona, and The Last Days of Disco would also be in there. Great dialogue in those movies. Wonderful, witty dialogue, and probably a lot more. But I just can't. No, they're not coming to mind right now. And I still kind of have a thing for the pulpy type of, like, the kind of movies that I liked in my youth. But I can't love those. I can't watch them in quite the same way that I could watch them when I was a kid. The most exciting cinema experience of my life was seeing Return of the Jedi in 1983, because there was so much build-up since the cliffhanger ending of Empire Strikes Back, and it was 3 years later, and everybody was talking about what really happens, who dies, and all this other stuff, and it was so exciting to see it when I was 12 years old with my friends. It was just the most exciting, one of the most exciting experiences of my life. One of the best days of my life. I know that sounds crazy, and and maybe to some of you it's like, oh, you maybe you want to look down on me because it's a Hollywood movie, and you should, the best days of your life should be about your family or whatever. I'm just saying, I'm not saying a Hollywood movie is more important than my family. I'm just saying on a day that I felt real joy, was that was one of those days. And looking back now, I'm so much aware of the flaws of Return of the Jedi. It's a heavily flawed movie, although I still love it, of course. But it was again, a truly exciting experience for me. Okay, I will leave off there and take this up next time. Thanks for watching.